Um, I'm a little bit nervous because I'm not used to standing up or talking to real people or not swearing for 30 minutes. So I'll just compose myself and play the show reel for you and then pick up after that. Yes, that is me, and that is a real pipe, but I'm not smoking it. So this isn't the career that I always dreamt of. I started off originally being a cabinet maker and a furniture maker, was extremely bored of it. It wasn't creative enough for me. I wanted to do something else, didn't really know what it would be. And I bought my first computer in my 20s, only just a couple of years ago, and just to write music. And then a friend of mine introduced me to design and animation software, and I was immediately hooked by it. I couldn't afford to go to college or university. There weren't really the courses available back then anyway, or certainly not locally, for me to do any of that. So I needed to figure out how I was going to go from being a cabinet maker into doing some kind of design or 3D thing. I subscribed to every creative magazine I could find. There weren't that many at the time. Starting off with CGI magazine, animation magazine, computer arts specials, and then eventually 3D World came along with an amazing illustration on the front by Mr. Andrew Combe over there. So I just absorbed myself into this world and these magazines, tried to learn as much as I could, installed all the software off the covers, and as I said, tried to figure out how I was going to move into this kind of career. Basically, I tried to use the skills and experience I already had and figured, well, if I can get a job that's just a little step towards that, maybe I can then pick up some more skills and experience and then do another step to the next thing. So I knew how to use machinery, I knew how to use hand tools, I had lots of practical skills. Thankfully, I saw a job for a screen printer, went and spoke to them, showed them what I could do, and they thought I was perfect for it. So there's lots of manual work in there. While I was working as a screen printer, they also had a sign writing department and a design department. So I managed to sort of weed my way into doing those little bits as well. I picked the brains of the people that worked in the design department, asked them what software they used, how they used it. Eventually did a little bit of that, and then managed to find a job at a newspaper publisher's. Originally just scanning photographs and illustrations in, and then becoming more of an art worker and actually doing some of the design and illustrations myself and doing page layouts and stuff like that. All this time I'm reading magazines, I'm buying books, I'm trying to learn how to do more of the 3D stuff, and then got a job as an architectural visualizer. So within 3 years I'd gone from being a cabinet maker to doing kind of this dream job, basically the job that I'm still doing in one way or another, and didn't have any of the student debt, which is probably a bit of a taboo thing because I'm not telling you to all quit and go and get a job straight away. But if you are struggling, there's ways, you know, to go around things. Don't ever feel that you're trapped into doing one thing or one way of doing something. So while working as an architectural visualizer, most of the work that we were getting, and this is one of those early illustrations, most of the work that we got was coming from watercolor artists and traditional illustrators. More and more people were using 3D visuals, and the watercolor artists were panicking a little bit. So they were basically now acting as agents, and they were asking us to produce the illustrations for them, but still using a lot of their techniques. So a lot of the same compositional techniques, using things like foreground branches, foreground shadows, lighting them in a very particular way. And although things have obviously improved technically and visually, it's still basically the same kind of stuff that I do every day when I'm doing architectural visuals. It's the same simple compositional techniques that just work and have worked for many, many years. So being a bit of a precocious idiot, I decided I was going to set up my own business after 3 years of doing architectural visuals. And I kind of knew that my work was better than what I was doing previously, but I was very, very naive. I had no business skills. I didn't know how to market myself. It was in 2006, 2 years before the financial crash, 2008, which completely wiped the whole housing market and all the architectural visualization jobs. So I was in a bit of a panic, but thankfully, the UK labour market was extremely cheap at this point. So I managed to find a lot of jobs abroad in the US, Australia, places like that. So basically going through freelance bidding sites where you would have to buy credits or tokens to then bid on a job, and also just going through internet forums and trying to build up connections through that. So over those next few years, I did dive maps for a diving company in Australia, where they basically sink battleships and create artificial reefs. I was doing product renders for, that in particular was an ESPN smart remote control, which looks absolutely ridiculous now because we've all got smartphones and, you know, smart TVs anyway. A nutrition company hired me to do some animations for marketing their products. This weird, skinless muscle man, which they were really desperate to have this because they wanted to show, you know, how the muscles work. You drink their product and it makes you big and strong and stuff. And then immediately kicked back saying, can we make him look a little bit more friendly? Because he's a little bit too scary. So it basically came down to putting eyelids on him, and they were happy with that. I also got my first IMDb credit for The Amazing Adventures of the Living Corpse, which, I'll be honest, I've never actually seen it. I saw the production of it, and that was enough. I mean, there must be, you know, give a lot of credit to Justin, that was the producer of it. He did his best to save what was a mess at the time. But also, he gave me a lot of other work as well, which was great. Which leads on to the next video that I'm going to play for you for a mortgage company in the US. And I'll talk through about some of the work that went into that.
Ooh, check these out. It says they'll help you see what your home could be like with a dream loan from Primary Residential Mortgage.
Wow.
It says we can borrow up to 10% above the value of the home. That's like $30,000 to fix up this house.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Can I see those? I'm thinking man cave.
Not a chance.
So yeah, I know it's super cheesy. This was, I think it was about 2011, something like that. Way before VR and stuff, which is interesting because we'll get to that in a minute anyway. But it was a really great project to work on because I basically learned how to cheat at most things. At the beginning, you see the original bathroom and the original kitchen. Those two photos at the top are all I had to work with. They were the plate shots. So everything in that scene was basically that photograph projected onto really, really simple geometry. which over the course of a couple of seconds shrinks, folds, disappears, and then the new CGI version appears behind it. So it's such a short shot. The camera's moving very slowly, so by the time you would get to see all the imperfections in it, it's all vanished. Some of the things I was really proud with it was just the really tiny details, which are things that I get quite obsessed with. There's things in the bathroom, for example, where the new towels come out of the wall, and they don't just merge out of the wall. There's a little flap as they come out, which is, there's no cloth dynamics or anything like that. It's literally they bend and then fall down. There's a wine glass and the wine bottle which drop down on the shelf and just wobble a little bit and bounce as they hit. And at the very end of the shot, there's, in the kitchen, there's a fruit bowl that falls and the fruit plops into that. So it's those little details that I'm always a little bit obsessive with. So we're now into the 2010s, and I don't really know what I am at this point. I'm no longer an architectural visualizer. I'm just doing all sorts of stuff. So I'm working on TV ads and marketing campaigns for Toilet Duck and doing whiskey bottles and chocolates. I'm doing editorial images for magazines and lots of training material for the offshore industry, all sorts of things. So I'm basically, from this point onwards, all I think of myself as is a creative, because I'm not even just a 3D guy. I'm doing little bits of everything, and I think a lot of freelancers or a lot of guys in the same sort of industry probably agree that they're the same thing. You have to learn so many different tools to get by in this sort of stuff. And then in 2015, as a kind of culmination of me having all these skills, even going right back to doing the furniture making and stuff like that, I'm offered a position as a creative director at a startup VR company. At the very start of it, there was just 3 of us. So I was the creative director, we had a technical director that did all the coding development work, and then we had the business guy that basically got all the sales and ran the main business part of it. So over the course of me sort of working there, as I said, it was a culmination of all the stuff that I'd done previously. VR was not really a consumer thing at that point. We were working on prototype, like Oculus development kits. Our 360 cameras at that point were GoPros that were all stuck into a cluster. And we'd then have to figure out ways of stitching all that footage together to make a 360 image. Thankfully, things have improved a little bit since then. But there was even little things like working with an unwrapped 360 image or 360 video, going way back to when I first started learning all this 3D stuff, understanding what an unwrapped image looks like, because if you put a texture on a sphere, generally it's an unwrapped texture, so understanding where there's pinch points and how to correct those. And basically I was learning how to film stuff as well as doing all the stitching and things like that. I'm building sets, I'm figuring out how motion capture works. I'm building bizarre things like Frank in the bottom corner, which is an electric wheelchair base that was then hooked up to a wireless controller so that we could wheel it around buildings and hide out of the way so it doesn't get into the 360 shot. While I was there, I was lucky enough to work in LA, in Myanmar, in Barcelona, Saint-Tropez, Wales, all the exotic places, and worked for really big brands such as Brabham for the launch of their BT62 hypercar, Yamaha, what else we got? Loads of stuff. We did an experience for World Cup 66 as well, which was shown at Wembley for the FA and worked with loads of Premiership football clubs. The last project I worked on while I was there was for Mazda. They basically wanted an experience to travel all around Europe, which would showcase their MX-5 RF sports car. The experience itself would be you would sit inside the car, you'd put a VR headset on, and you'd be taken on this trip around the Italian Alps. So we had to figure out how we were going to do this. We could just strap a 360 camera in the car, but the trouble with that is that if you've got a camera in front of the driver, as soon as you put a headset on, you're sitting on his lap, which is going to be a bit weird. and you're also going to be too close to everything else. So the most obvious solution, or at least as it seemed to me at the time, was that we would stick 360 camera on the front, or rather a cluster of digital SLR cameras that were all pointing in different directions. We'd stick that on the bonnet, stick cameras on the back and the sides. I think we had 7 cameras in total on the outside. We had reference cameras on the inside to film the driver, and also any of the dials that are in there. We then stitched all the outside cameras into a 360 video, and then replaced the entire car and driver inside it, which meant that we could put the virtual camera on the shoulders of the driver. So as you sit in the car, you're seeing the driver's arms, you're in his position. The 360 video then acts obviously as a light source, and also acts as a reflection source as well. It wasn't a perfect solution, as with most projects, and certainly something that I've learned over the years is that you do what you can to get the job out on time and on budget. So there's certainly things that could have improved. So 2018, I'm back to Eggbox Studios. I had a few frustrations with the whole VR thing. Not so much with the 360, but it was still early days with it, working with game engines, the frustrations of wanting to push quality to the limit and how difficult that can be when you're working with real-time stuff. So I'm back to doing architectural visuals, product visuals, TV work, exactly the same as when I first started in 2006. I'm 2 years before the world goes into complete chaos and all the work dries up again. I've got more experience, and I'm older and I'm wiser. There were a lot of problems at that time, as we all know, but there were also some vaguely positive things with it. One of the opportunities that came up was to actually educate people on the use of CGI that maybe hadn't used it before. Certainly nothing new to use 3D renders instead of photographs, but it's amazing how many people didn't actually realize that that was a thing. I mean, IKEA have been doing it for years and years, but it's amazing when you speak to people about using CGIs, quite often they'll have some weird perception that it's going to be this horrible, like 90s game graphics or something like that. And obviously during the pandemic, people were, or companies that were wanting to launch products were hitting various roadblocks, certainly in this case, where the bottles are in one location, the labels are in another location, the photographer can't get into a studio. There's not really any option if you want to launch your product or if you want to market your product and you've got a magazine waiting for the photographs to turn up. You need to find some other way of doing it. So CGI was the way to go. And thankfully I managed to pick up quite a lot of work purely because people weren't able to do things the old way. There's also a great opportunity for me to relearn. I had a lot of downtime as well. I was able to go back to studying drawing and painting and various other techniques. It was also a good opportunity for me to look at what I do now, or what I was doing, and see if there's ways to improve it. One of the things that was born out of that was a really ridiculous video that I'll show you next, where I basically doodled something that I thought looked quite cool. I started playing around with mechanical rigging and animation, which evolved into a foot, and then that became a leg, and then the next thing I know, 8 days later, I've created a very short, which had all the animation, all the modeling, music, sound design, and literally everything. So prepare to be underwhelmed. It was a combination of everything that I'd kind of learned over many years and never really had time to put it into practice. I wasn't going to get a client phone me up and say, hey, we want this robot to land in a desert with a cowboy and we want you to zap it. So sometimes you have to just take these things into your own hands. I'm pretty much ready to wrap up. This is the last project that I've worked on, or finished project that I've worked on, for a grade 2 listed stable block, which is about to be refurbished and turned into a wedding and events venue. It's completely derelict at the moment, and the client obviously wanted to start marketing it for weddings towards the end of this year or next year. And it was a great opportunity to do something a little bit more high-end than maybe some other things that I've had a chance to do. So I will finish with this and then see if you have any questions.